It's another busy weekend in Happy Valley, which means it's another busy recruiting weekend for the Blue White Illustrated staff. He is Ryan Snyder. I am Sean Fitz. We're here with you for a short period on Friday afternoon, and it's a busy Friday for Penn State. Ryan, the visitor list looks good. Before we get into that, we're going to talk a little news and notes from the week, and a few things have popped up in the Penn State recruiting realm this weekend.
It's been a busy 4 weeks, it feels like, honestly. We're getting close to the end here. I think Penn State, side note, cool quick, I was doing this the other day. I think Penn State's had recruits on campus every single day but 3, I think. And maybe we haven't put it out there every day, but there's been like a, smaller recruit or, a potential walk-on or something. But since spring practice started, I think they've had at least someone on campus all but 3 days, I believe it is. But let's start with Garrett Sexton. I think top 4. Puts it out there the other day: Iowa, Minnesota, Penn State, Oklahoma. So Garrett Sexton isn't a player I think we've talked about a ton, and there's a reason for that. It's because he's kind of blown up pretty quickly. Doing some digging here, 6'7", 245, right? Sounds like a great frame there. I mean, if anything, could be a little bit bigger. But the more I've dug, he was a quarterback as an underclassman, so a freshman, sophomore year, plays offensive tackle here his junior year, and really everything takes off January, February, of course, now we're into March and April. Narrows his list to 4, just visited Penn State last Thursday. From what I've been digging on, Penn State's certainly in a good position after this visit, and Penn State is very high on Sexton. Love his athleticism. Again, if this was a player I think that would have emerged on everyone's scene in the fall, we would be talking about him maybe not quite in the Kevin Haywood top tier, but he's not that far off, John. So Oklahoma, Minnesota visits, those are still upcoming. Where things go from there, I think we'll be able to get a better read. But I believe, Sean, did he tweet out that he's going to commit on May 1st? I think that was part of his tweet. Am I right?
It's early May, and that's curious because he hasn't visited these other schools yet. So you got to think there's at least something brewing in his mind there, especially with Oklahoma. The people that you reach out and talk to say that Oklahoma's in the mix, even though they haven't had him on campus. I think it's interesting that he does not have a Wisconsin offer, even though he's been there a few times, most recently, I believe, at the end of March. So I think that there's still questions to be answered in this recruitment. Wisconsin, I think, will always be prevalent, even if they have an offer. This is a situation where they maybe will want to get him to work out this spring or get him on campus for camp or something like that. So I think that that's an interesting subplot. Wherever he commits on May 1st, I think the Badgers will still be in the conversation. But yeah, I agree with you. I think Penn State is in a solid spot right now, even though there's still some happenings to come here. Like it's not one of those situations where we can put in a pick right now and say that's going to be the same, in a month from now. So I think that it's a very intriguing situation. You look at Penn State's offensive line board, could be a month where Penn State does well on the offensive line. Blue-white games coming up and things of that nature. So I think that with Sexton, that's certainly a guy to name, certainly a name that has gotten on the radar quickly, but at the same time is 1-0 for Penn State fans.
For sure. Okay. Next guy, Brady Prieskorn, tight end, out of Michigan. Penn State gets Luke Reynolds 2 weeks ago, right? Okay. Sean and I have been pushing for the longest time. You only need one tight end in this class. This is why Sean always tells me don't do those scholarship projections in February, because here we are in a situation where and look, I think we made this clear when Luke committed, but just to clarify, Penn State is very much still pushing for Brady Prieskorn. They're very much pushing for Caleb Odom as well. Odom, of course, the Georgia tight end who does have an official visit set to Penn State, but also after setting that is added Alabama and Georgia and some other schools, which kind of makes me think that was not quite as realistic as it looked maybe 6 weeks ago. But Brady Prieskorn, we found out, did make it to campus on Monday. Gathering some more information. I know he stayed into the evening. I know they had dinner with him. It was very much a personal day, a similar experience to what we saw with Quentin Martin a week before that. From what I got here, Michigan, Penn State seem to be the two schools emerging, and I'm not sure he's going to take all 5 of his official visits either. I will note that he doesn't have an official visit set with Penn State yet, but Penn State does expect that to happen. They're just kind of working out some dates. Family has some things they want to figure out and work out for June before they say, specifically, yes, we can come this day. So we'll see where things emerge there, but looks like Penn State's going to be top 2, top 3. I think I'm trying to remember. I know his brothers at Ole Miss now. They were one of the schools. Who were the other schools, Sean? Do you remember with Brady Prieskorn? trying to
I
remember
just
who they
remember
were.
Michigan State not in there. So like we've
That
talked so
too.
many times about Prieskorn staying close to home, and it seems like it's Michigan's on the RPM right now 90%. Like, and we don't do percentages here, but like I think it's pretty fair to call Michigan the favorite. But yeah, I think he'll check out some other schools. I agree with you. Probably not going to use all those official visits, but he's been to a bunch of places. Been to Michigan 5 times. Been to Penn State 4 times. There's a familiarity there where I don't think he's going to feel the need to waste official visits. So I think that's just an interesting subplot there. And a couple things from Penn State's vantage point. Number one, makes you feel better about them taking Luke Reynolds in the sense that, Prieskorn was still in play, Odom's still in play, but, they feel good enough about Reynolds to take him right now. And number two, I mean, this is kind of your top target wants to visit. You're not going to turn him down. So like,
No.
Don't need 2 tight ends in this class. Took a couple of tight ends in the last class. So like, if your top target is that interested when his perceived favorite is right in his backyard and there's, draws to home and everything like that, it screams legitimate interest on his part, which you've been saying for, months now.
Mm-hmm. Just to clarify, he did do a top 8. It was in March. Ole Miss, Penn State, Michigan, as we mentioned. The other 5 were Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Miami. I know just from talking to his mom at one point, I know Georgia definitely had his interest. I think Tennessee was kind of the other. Whether those schools are really going to merge, I mean, I don't really see that happening. This looks like a Penn State, Ohio, or Penn State, Michigan battle. Expect them to end up at one of those 2 schools, but we'll see if he takes some other official visits. All right, Sean, big Friday here. It's Easter weekend, of course. Happy Easter, everybody, if you're watching this early. Penn State, as they've done in the past, they usually try to get guys on campus the Friday before Easter, make Saturday a little bit more relaxed, and then, of course, they get time with their family on Sunday. Sean, I'll throw it to you. I have about a dozen or so guys, scholarship guys, coming today, 10 of whom are 2024, and out of those 10, 8 of them are 4-star prospects. So when you talked about 4-star talent, today is actually one of the best lists we've seen over the last 3-4 weeks.
Would you say it's a good Friday for visitors?
Oh, dang.
Yes. Okay. So nation's number 1 prospect by On3, Dylan Stewart. He's not arrived yet by the time that we're recording this, but is expected on campus today. That's one that, we've said it a bunch. We see it going SEC, maybe Ohio State as well. But this is a situation where Penn State's got to at least, put themselves in the conversation, try and get him back for an official visit. I don't think that it's going to, end up with him playing here in college, but stranger things have happened. Dylan Stewart, very talented edge prospect from Washington, D.C., Friendship Collegiate. By the way, Penn State just offered his teammate, DeAndre Cook, who's a defensive tackle from Friendship. They've offered Bryce Jenkins, the 2025 from Friendship. So they've offered a lot of guys on that defensive line, and Stewart's the top one. I mean, he's really, really good prospect. He's been on campus a handful of times. I mean, he's been for games. I believe he came for a whiteout in 2021. Yeah, the big boys are coming for Dylan Stewart. Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, everybody's in there. It would take a minor miracle for Penn State to land him, but they're getting him back on campus. Also, South Carolina strong in that one as well. So, but he's the number 1 player in the country. We kind of got to highlight him being on campus today.
Pretty important. Yeah, he has 3 official visits set. I'm not sure if you clarified that or not, Sean. Georgia, June 2nd, Ohio State, June 16th, and then South Carolina, June 23rd. So he has obviously 2 more that he can set. There's only 1 more free weekend out of this. So let's see where that goes. I wouldn't be absolutely shocked if he took an official visit to Penn State, but I think it's pretty clear those 3 are well ahead of pretty much everybody else at the moment. And I think it's Ohio State and Georgia are really just going to end up being the 2 schools there. Okay. Nick Marsh. Nick Marsh made it. Sean, how many times have we talked about Nick Marsh over 6 months, but always have been like, well, he's committed to Michigan State, probably not going to anything going to happen here. And then boom, the 6'3", 200 4-star quarterback is expected to make it to Penn State today. He did tweet it out last night. So all signs there is that he will be on campus. Sean, I'll throw it to you. I mean, man, is this Penn State's number 1 wide receiver target? We definitely thought that in the fall. Obviously, there's been a receiver coach change there. But if he's not number 1, he's definitely top 3 or so.
Yeah, I would say so. And by the way, how many times did we reach out to him this week trying to get him to confirm that before he tweeted it out last night? You were absolutely livid. I was asleep. But you were absolutely livid. No, Nick Marsh, one of my favorite receivers in this class. A lot of ball skills, kind of like turn on the tape this morning of Noah Rogers, who signed with Ohio State last year. Kind of maybe a little bit taller than Noah, but like similar prospect. Like I think he's a top 50 prospect. Really, really good player. Was committed to Michigan State for a long time there, and kind of opened it up and has opened himself up to a number of schools. Was down at Auburn last weekend, I believe it is. And Penn State has stayed on him. He was Taylor Stubblefield's top guy. I think he's right in that mix for Marcus Hagans as well. But yeah, just a phenomenally talented player there. And I think he's really got a lot going for him as one of the best receivers in the country. Penn State's got to get him. I think this is the first time overall on campus, even though they've been after him for a long time. Got to get him back for an official visit to have a shot in this one. But yeah, he's really talented. And you look around the region that Penn State's playing with right now, it's not a ton. You know, there's some other guys that are out there, some guys that are probably would be pretty good mid-level receivers, but you're shooting high with the new coaching staff, and Nick Marsh is a name that once he decommitted from Michigan State said, well, we're not sure if Penn State's going to actually be in the mix at the end, but they're going to make an effort because he's phenomenally talented.
For sure. One thing I'll say on Nick Marsh, he's taken 3 visits in 2023 so far. One was to Michigan State. He's since decommitted. The other 2, Tennessee and Auburn. Sean, what do those 3 schools have in common? NIL.
Yes.
NIL. They are all very, very aggressive NIL schools. So, I mean, I haven't talked to Nick about that. I don't want to put that in people's heads too much, but just from the outside looking in, I wonder how important that is in this recruitment.
Yeah. Going to be part of the conversation. So
for sure.
All right. Very good. Who we got next?
Sean, I'll throw, well, let's see here. There's 2 more really guys I think we need to discuss. Stacy Gage, running back, St. Thomas Aquinas out of Fort Lauderdale. Where's Stacy at on their board? It's hard for me to say. I mean, it's funny. He's at St. Thomas Aquinas now, home to Jordan Lyle, who I think is Penn State's number 1 running back target. You can make a case for 1 or 2 others. There's really like kind of a top 3 or so, but Jordan Lyle's absolutely up there. Stacy Gage comes out as a freshman, massive year. Was he with K-Tron that first year, Sean? I think he was.
I believe he shared carries with 2 years with K-Tron Allen going back to 2021. Yeah, he was like on the map as like maybe a top 10 recruit, maybe a guy that's number 1 recruiting or number 1 running back in his class. Went to IMG for 2 years, went to Tampa Wharton for his junior year. Now it's at STA. I mean, there's like, I don't want to say he came out hot. Like he came out really hot. You thought he was going to be everything, and kind of leveled off a little bit. I think some of the bigger schools have backed off. Penn State's been in that relationship. He was one of the guys actually that came to the Outback Bowl practice down there in Tampa before Penn State played Arkansas. So like, there's talent there. It's just a matter of, has he developed physically enough to keep up with the talent there? We talk about that with running backs all the time. Guys get offered, and then they're, it's a different looking prospect when they're a freshman, sophomore than they are when they're a senior. So very curious on the trajectory of where he stands on Penn State's board, because it's not a guy that we've heard mentioned a ton. You mentioned Lyle is certainly a mainstay there. Quentin Martin, we kind of have as a running back / athlete. So like, do we list him at that position or not? There's again, a ton of guys on Jaywan Sider's board. So this is just another one to throw into the mix, and he's on campus on Friday.
Yeah, let me clarify. I mean, Quentin Martin, it probably should be the number 1 running back. I just look at Lyle as more of a true running back, but I think if you ask Sider or you ask Penn State that, they would probably tell you Quentin Martin. He's an incredibly important recruit. So, all right, I'll take the last one. Jake Guarnera, offensive lineman out of Point Vedra Beach, Florida, coming up this weekend. I think this is Jake's 3rd or 4th visit, I want to say. I know he camped with Penn State last summer. Got to watch him up close, work with Phil Troutwine. I actually had no idea who he was at that camp, and then I finally figured it out. Really good-looking prospect. The more I've learned on Jake, the more I'm very intrigued with him. And I think Penn State's in the mix more than my colleagues do. Now, look at his visit list. 8 trips to Florida. Obviously, I think you got to lean towards the Gators there. I would lean towards them as the favorite, and he has an official visit locked in. But I think Penn State's going to get an official from Jake, and I think that they're going to push for him. Now, with that said, he is an interior offensive lineman. We know offensive tackle is more important, and we know William Satterwhite, who will be up here next weekend, is really that top-tier interior guy. And then when you add Cooper Cousins in, who we expect to play center, they really don't need 3 interior guys. But, I mean, from talking to people, I do think Guarnera is high enough on their board that it would be something they seriously consider if he wanted to commit somewhat soon, we'll say in the next month or two. If you get too deep into June and, this class is halfway, 3/4 of the way full, then that's a different story. But certainly a guy that I think fans need to know about. I do think Penn State will get him up for an official visit. That'll get sorted out this week, but just from reading the tea leaves, I think that's something they want to do. Florida State, NC State, kind of other schools in the mix, but this really feels like a Florida-Penn State battle to me coming down the stretch. Anything else, Sean?
I think Michigan's been in there as well. So like, I think that a lot of schools see him as a potential center. So that'll change the math a little bit when you talk about what we're looking at from a national perspective. But yeah, I think he's a guy that's firmly on that board. That offensive line board seems to get bigger every day. I mean, they've offered a ton of guys. They're in with a ton of guys, hosting a ton of guys. Got a couple of other ones on campus this week and this weekend. So like, there's a lot of names to track. You can do that all at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. You can also follow us on our social channels. Subscribe on the YouTube platform. And I think, Ryan, that's probably it. I hope everyone has a great Easter weekend. I hope you and the family have a great Easter weekend, and we'll catch you on Monday for the recruiting show. Thank you.